I spent 10 years telling men they were predators for existing in public spaces. I applauded when they crossed the street to avoid making women uncomfortable. I celebrated when they stopped offering help, stopped intervening, stopped being present. My name is Rachel, and 3 years ago, I learned the terrifying consequences of getting exactly what I asked for. This is the story of how my ideology nearly got me killed, and how I discovered that safety requires the very thing I'd spent a decade dismantling: men who are willing to act. This is my confession about the night everything changed. 7 years ago, I was a rising star in feminist activism. At 32, I'd built a following of 500,000 women across social media. My specialty was public space safety, or as I framed it, liberating women from the male gaze and male interference. I ran viral campaigns with hashtags like #CrossTheStreet and #StopSaviorComplex. The message was simple: men's presence in public spaces was inherently threatening. Their attempts to help were actually assertions of dominance. A man who intervened in a woman's problem wasn't being helpful, he was assuming she couldn't handle it herself. My most successful campaign was called "The Intervention is the Problem." I posted hundreds of stories from women who'd been helped by men in public, and I reframed every single one as a microaggression. A man stopped a woman from walking into traffic? He was asserting physical control over her body. A man intervened when another man was harassing a woman? He was treating women as territory to be defended, perpetuating the idea that women need male protection. A man helped a woman carry something heavy? He was implying she was weak. I had an answer for everything. Every act of help was actually an act of oppression. Every intervention was actually an intrusion. My TED Talk, "The Danger of Male Heroism," got 3 million views. In it, I argued that the hero narrative was a patriarchal construct designed to make women dependent on men. I said that women would rather face danger alone than accept help that came with strings attached. The audience gave me a standing ovation. Major publications called me visionary. Universities invited me to speak. I was shaping how an entire generation thought about gender dynamics in public spaces. I taught men that the safest thing they could do was nothing. Don't look, don't speak, don't intervene, don't help. Just keep walking. Your presence is the problem, I told them. Your instinct to protect is actually your instinct to control. And they listened. God help me, they listened. The change happened faster than I expected. Within 3 years, I could see my influence everywhere. Men stopped making eye contact with women on the street. They crossed to the other side of the sidewalk when a woman approached. They put in headphones and stared at their phones, making themselves as invisible as possible. When I rode the subway late at night, men wouldn't sit near me even when the train was crowded. They'd stand rather than take an empty seat next to a woman. I'd see them physically turn their backs, creating distance. At first, I celebrated this. I'd post about it, rode the train tonight and had an entire row to myself. Men are finally learning to give us space. Progress. My followers loved it. They shared their own stories of men avoiding them, treating them like radioactive material. We laughed about it. We called it male fear and said it was about time they understood what it felt like to modify their behavior. But then the other stories started coming in. Stories my followers didn't share publicly, but sent to me in private messages. A woman was being followed home at night. 3 different men saw it happening. All 3 crossed the street and kept walking. Later, surveillance footage would show them clearly noticing, clearly choosing not to intervene. She was assaulted in her building's lobby. Another woman collapsed on a subway platform, possibly having a seizure. A dozen men were present. Not one approached her. They called 911 from a distance, but wouldn't get close enough to help. She hit her head when she fell. The injury was worse because no one stabilized her. A teenage girl was being screamed at by an aggressive man in a parking lot. 5 men walked past within 10 feet. Their eyes slid over the scene and they kept moving. Someone eventually called security, but from inside a store. No one wanted to be the man who intruded. When women confronted these men later, on social media, in news interviews, they all said variations of the same thing: I didn't want to make things worse. I didn't want to insert myself where I wasn't wanted. I didn't want to be called a creep or accused of having a savior complex. I was taught that helping is actually hurting. They quoted feminist literature. Some of them quoted me directly. I told myself these were exceptions. Freak incidents. The price of progress. You can't change culture without some growing pains, right? I kept posting. Kept teaching. Kept spreading the gospel that men should make themselves smaller, quieter, less present. The breaking point came at a conference in Seattle. I was the keynote speaker at a summit on gender and public space. 2,000 people, mostly women, but maybe 300 men who'd come to learn how to be better allies. My speech was called Dismantling the Protector Myth. For 45 minutes, I tore apart the idea that women needed men to step in, to defend, to intervene. I showed clips of men helping women and dissected how each interaction was actually reinforcing patriarchal power dynamics. I got 3 standing ovations. Afterward, during the cocktail reception, I noticed something strange. A man had cornered one of the young conference volunteers, probably 22, 23 years old. He was standing too close, touching her arm despite her obvious discomfort. She kept stepping back. He kept following. I watched this happen. So did about 30 other people, including at least 15 men. No one moved. I felt this surge of anger. Here was a perfect example of male predation, and even at a feminist conference, no one was doing anything about it. So I intervened. I walked over, inserted myself between them, told him firmly to back off. He got aggressive immediately, got in my face, called me a bitch, told me to mind my own business. That's when I looked around and really saw the crowd. Dozens of people watching. Multiple men within 5 feet, some of them large, strong-looking guys who could have easily stepped in. They just stared. One was literally recording on his phone. Are you all just going to stand there? I shouted. A man near me, mid-40s, business casual, actually said, "You've spent 3 hours telling us that intervening is perpetuating patriarchy. That our instinct to protect is actually an instinct to control. I'm respecting your boundaries by not inserting my male energy into your situation." He said it earnestly. Like he was applying my own lessons. The aggressive man shoved me. Hard. I stumbled backward, and still, no one moved. Finally, a woman called security. The aggressive man was escorted out. The young volunteer was shaken but okay. But I couldn't stop staring at those men who'd watched. Who'd done nothing because I'd taught them that nothing was the right thing to do. 6 months after Seattle, I was in Chicago for another speaking event. My Uber dropped me off 4 blocks from my hotel because of construction. It was 11 p.m. I'd walked alone at night hundreds of times. I'd always felt safe. I lived in a good neighborhood in Boston, traveled to nice parts of cities. I'd written entire articles about how women shouldn't have to modify their behavior, shouldn't have to be afraid. But that night, something felt wrong. There was a man behind me. Not close, but following. When I turned a corner, he turned. When I slowed down, he slowed down. When I sped up, so did he. I passed 3 different men walking the opposite direction on the street. I made eye contact with each one, clear, desperate eye contact that screamed help me. All 3 looked away. Crossed the street. Kept walking. The man behind me got closer. I pulled out my phone, texted my location to my sister. The man was 10 feet behind me now. I could hear him breathing. 2 more men were standing outside a restaurant, smoking. I walked directly toward them, thinking proximity to other people would save me. I looked right at them. They saw everything. Saw the guy following me, saw the fear on my face. One of them stubbed out his cigarette and went inside. The other pulled out his phone and became very interested in it. The man grabbed my arm. I screamed. A real, primal scream that echoed off the buildings. Nothing happened. The street wasn't empty, there were people in windows, people in cars stopped at the light, people walking on the next block. I know they heard me. No one came. The man dragged me toward an alley. I fought, screamed again, clawed at him. He hit me hard enough that I saw stars. And then, finally, someone intervened. A homeless man. Probably 60 years old, thin, wearing 3 different jackets. He came out of nowhere and threw himself at my attacker with this guttural yell. They fought. The homeless man was getting destroyed, my attacker was bigger, younger, stronger, but he kept fighting. Kept getting back up. Kept putting himself between me and danger. Finally, the attacker ran. The homeless man collapsed, bleeding from his mouth, his nose may be broken. I knelt next to him, crying, trying to help. He waved me off. Get to your hotel, he said. I'm fine. You saved my life, I sobbed. Why? Why did you help when no one else would? He looked at me with these tired eyes. Lady, I got nothing to lose. Those other guys? They got jobs, families, reputations. They've been told that helping is wrong now. That they're not supposed to intervene. Better to watch a woman get hurt than risk being called a predator themselves. He coughed blood. But I remember when things were different. When men were supposed to step in. Before y'all activists convinced everyone that being a man meant being dangerous. I tried to give him money, tried to get him help. He refused. Just walked away, limping, bleeding, disappearing into the night. I made it to my hotel. Called the police. Gave a statement. Went to my room. And then I broke down completely. I spent 2 weeks in my apartment after Chicago. I didn't post on social media. Didn't answer emails. Just sat with what had happened. The homeless man had saved me. But a dozen other men with resources, strength, stability, had watched and done nothing. I'd taught them to do nothing. I started researching. And what I found destroyed me. Reports of assault in public spaces were up 63% in 5 years. But here's the thing, it wasn't that more assaults were happening. It was that they were succeeding more often because bystander intervention had collapsed. Studies showed that men's willingness to intervene in public conflicts had dropped 70% in the same period. When researchers asked why, the answers were consistent. I don't want to be accused of toxic masculinity. I was told that women don't need saving. I didn't want to impose my male presence. I've seen too many videos of men getting destroyed online for intervening. There were hundreds of cases. A woman being dragged into a car in a mall parking lot, dozen male witnesses who called 911 but didn't physically intervene. She was murdered. At trial, when asked why they didn't help, one man broke down and said, "I have a daughter in college. If I'd touched that man, even to stop him, I could have been accused of assault myself. My daughter's future could have been destroyed by the publicity. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But I have too much to lose." I found a forum where men discussed this exact thing, thousands of them talking about deliberately avoiding situations where they might need to intervene. They called it risk management. They talked about women like we were legal liability waiting to happen. I saw a woman getting harassed on the train, one wrote. 5 years ago, I would have stepped in automatically. Now? I moved to another car. Because if I intervene, there's a chance she's filming it. A chance I become the villain in a viral video. A chance I lose my job, my reputation, everything. Not worth it. Another, my daughter asked why I didn't help a woman who was being yelled at in a parking lot. I told her that helping isn't allowed anymore. That men are supposed to call the police and let them handle it. She asked what happens before the police arrive. I didn't have an answer. They weren't monsters. They were men who'd internalized exactly what I'd taught them, that their intervention was unwanted, dangerous, part of the problem. I'd wanted to liberate women from unwanted male attention. Instead, I'd isolated us from wanted male protection. And I couldn't figure out how to get one without the other. I spent 3 months interviewing men across the country. I expected defensiveness, anger, the usual men's rights rhetoric. Instead, I found something more disturbing: resignation. Derek was a firefighter. 37, married, 2 kids. He told me he used to intervene whenever he saw trouble. It was instinct, part of his training. 2 years ago, I stopped a guy from hitting his girlfriend in a parking lot, he said. I got between them, held the guy back, gave the girlfriend time to get away. She filed a police report against her boyfriend. But she also posted on social media that I'd aggressively inserted myself into her situation. Said I was trying to be a hero and that she'd had it under control. The post went viral. I got death threats. People showed up at my fire station demanding I be fired. My kids got bullied at school. My wife was harassed online. All for stopping a guy from beating his girlfriend. Now? I see something happening, I call 911 and keep moving. I've got a family to protect, and I can't protect them if I'm fired or worse. Marcus was a teacher. He'd stopped intervening when students were in trouble outside of school. I saw one of my female students being cornered by grown men near campus, he said. 3 years ago, I would have walked over, put myself between them, used my presence to make them back off. But I teach in a district where male teachers are under constant suspicion. If I'd approached her, even to help, someone could have filmed it, taken it out of context. I could have lost my teaching license. So I called campus security and watched from 50 feet away. It took them 7 minutes to arrive. A lot can happen in 7 minutes. Story after story, the message was the same: the risk was too high. The potential cost of helping, social, professional, legal, outweighed the moral imperative to intervene. And these weren't bad men. They were good men who'd calculated that protecting themselves and their families required abandoning the instinct to protect strangers. I'd helped create this calculation. I knew I had to fix what I'd broken, even if it meant destroying my career. I wrote an essay called The Protection Paradox: How I Made Women Less Safe. I laid out everything: my activism, my teachings, the consequences. I admitted I'd been wrong. That women need men to be willing to intervene. That safety requires some degree of trust, cooperation, and yes, male protection. The backlash was instant and vicious. I was called a traitor, a handmaiden, a woman who'd betrayed feminism itself. I lost speaking gigs, sponsorships, most of my followers. Activists I'd worked with for years blocked me. But I also got messages from men, thousands of them. Thank you for saying this. I felt guilty for 3 years for not helping a woman who got attacked on my street. I watched from my window and called the police. She got hurt badly. I wake up thinking about it every day. I'm a father of daughters. I've taught them not to expect men to help them in public because that's what feminism told me to teach. Your essay made me realize I've made them more vulnerable, not more empowered. Slowly, I started having real conversations. With men about how to help without overstepping. With women about how to accept help without feeling diminished. With everyone about how safety requires community, not isolation. I'm working on a book now, The Courage to Act: Rebuilding Civic Protection in the Age of Social Media. It's about finding balance, teaching men when and how to intervene without being controlling, and teaching women that accepting help isn't accepting weakness. My publisher dropped me, so I'm self-publishing. It won't sell like my viral posts did. But if it helps even one man find the courage to step in, if it saves even one woman from what happened to me, it will be worth it. I'm 39 now. I still believe in feminism, in equality, in women's autonomy. But I've learned that ideology without nuance is dangerous. That pushing one value to its extreme creates different problems. Safety requires community. Community requires trust. Trust requires risk. And sometimes, risk means accepting help from people who are imperfect, who might make mistakes, but who are willing to act when it matters. The homeless man who saved me is still out there somewhere. I've tried to find him, to thank him properly, but the streets swallow people who don't want to be found. He had nothing to lose, so he acted. Everyone else had too much to lose, so they watched. I'm trying to rebuild a culture where men don't have to choose between being helpful and being safe themselves. Where intervention doesn't mean social suicide. Where protecting strangers isn't career suicide. If you're a man who stopped helping because you're afraid of the consequences, I understand why. I helped create that fear. But I'm asking you to find the courage anyway. Not to be a hero, not to control, just to be present. To act when someone needs help. And if you're a woman who's been taught that accepting help is accepting weakness, I'm asking you to reconsider. Safety isn't a solo achievement. It's a community effort. That night in Chicago taught me that ideological purity doesn't save lives. Human decency does. And sometimes, that means accepting that we need each other, messily, imperfectly, but genuinely. Maybe that's the revolution we actually need. What do you think? Has activism gone too far in the other direction? Have you experienced or witnessed this reluctance to help? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories about the messy reality of being human.